Outreach Coordinator at Clean Air, Cool Planet. It's my pleasure to facilitate our webinar today. And before I introduce our speakers, I just want to give you a few logistical tips. On the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a dashboard. You'll see that you're muted, and you will be for the duration of the webinar. However, you are able to ask questions of our speakers throughout the webinar by typing them into the questions panel. You'll also see that you have a hand that you can click on. And by clicking on that, you can let me know that you have a question or a logistical problem, or in fact your question is so long it would be easier if I unmuted you and called on you, which I'd be happy to do. So please take a second while I'm introducing our speakers to familiarize yourself with the dashboard on the side of your screen. So today at Clean Air, Cool Planet, we're joined by 3 experts in the field of calculating carbon sinks on campus, and I'm thrilled to introduce them to you. Our first speaker will be Mary Whitney, who's the University Sustainability Coordinator at Chatham University. Mary has spent the last decade in environmental education, working primarily with citizens, teachers, and their students. As the Sustainability Coordinator at Chatham, she leads collaboration on sustainability practices at the university, works to help Chatham meet its carbon neutrality goals, and teaches environmental studies and civic engagement. Mary Whitney is one of the founders of GEM, the Green Education Movement, a professional support and education organization for environmental education practitioners in Pittsburgh. She is a PhD student at Prescott College in all of her spare time, and has a Master of Public Policy and Management from the School of Public and International Affairs at the University of Pittsburgh. Our second speaker, David Bloniarz, is an urban forester with an extensive background in urban forest management and landscape design. He holds a master's degree in landscape architecture and a doctorate in urban forestry from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Presently, he is the project coordinator at the USDA Forest Service Northeast Center for Urban and Community Forestry, and at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. He is also an adjunct assistant professor there. He is filling in for Mark Truery, who wasn't able to join us today. And last, but certainly not least, is my boss, Jen Andrews, the Director of Program Planning and Coordination at Clean Air, Cool Planet. And Jen is well known in our campus community for advising stakeholders at colleges and universities on how to measure and manage their greenhouse gas emissions. Today, she'll be playing the role as, you know, with her carbon accounting nitpicky hat on, and we're really pleased that she's able to join us today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the slides over to Mary Whitney. And please, again, feel free to type in your questions at any time during our 3-panel presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Ann. Hang on one second, I'll get my slides up. Okay, it's nice to be here today. I will be talking about calculating and communicating for campus trees. Basically, we're looking for some new models. What is not counted, of course, soon ceases to count, and properly accounting for ecosystem services is extremely important. If we don't do that, we see the pattern of destruction and devaluation, of course, as we see right now in the Gulf or anywhere else around the world. This problem brought us to the environmental crisis that we have, and the fact that we even need remediating measures like the climate commitment in the first place are a part of the problem. So, failure to include methods for measuring sequestration from existing trees when we're conducting greenhouse gas audits is also a matter of concern to us. What we're looking to do is to connect tree preservation and planting policies to carbon reduction efforts. There's a large body of sound scientific research that supports the measured sequestration of carbon in existing trees whether they're street trees, whether they're in a landscape area, or as a forest preserve. David, I'm going to turn you off right now. There we go. Okay. What we want to do is to encourage tree planting as a carbon reduction measure. A big challenge for campuses, particularly urban campuses, is space, of course. Trees are last on the list for space needs. They're rarely budgeted for. So we're looking to reconceptualize campus trees as part of a carbon reduction strategy that perhaps can let us reprioritize space planning for trees as well. That's a baby oak, by the way. We want to also respect the preservation and precedence of trees before buildings or cars. This is a screenshot from Cupertino, California. These trees are being removed for a parking lot. And I don't know if you can notice just how small the root ball is there in proportion to the drip line of the tree. I really wonder if these trees survive. Even at Chatham, where we are committed to urban forest and our arboretum, we still have a constant tension between trees and buildings. Tree preservation has a lot of benefits, but I just want to make incredibly clear to everyone, so I've spelled it out, it is not an offset. We are not suggesting in any way that your existing trees reduce your existing campus footprint. Rather, a university that cuts down its trees is basically going to be increasing its carbon footprint by the amount of carbon from the trees that are now removed. Institutional footprints would be much larger when trees are removed, whether it's through disease, a hard winter like we had in the Northeast here this year. We lost quite a number of trees on our campus, or for a building project. So we're looking at a policy approach. We want to take emissions reductions policies that are generally based on reducing emissions through efficiency, which, as you're all familiar with, light-saving projects, water-saving, whatever, replacing emissions with clean alternatives, photovoltaic, solar thermal, and then we want to add back in, where it kind of gets short shrift, avoiding emissions through planning and conservation. The greenest energy is the energy you don't use, just as the emissions that you preserve, that you avoid through conservation of natural resources are also valuable. So we have some policy recommendations for what campus tree policies might look like. Firstly, we believe that everybody should complete a campus tree survey. You need to know very minimal things which your students can help you with. Diameter at the breast height of the tree, which is basically 4.5 feet off the ground. You want to assess the general health, its crown density, branching, etc. That stuff is actually pretty simple as well. You can sort of be like very, very poor, very, very good, in the middle. It's also very helpful to include any proximity to buildings, because these, of course, are your most endangered trees, most likely. People should identify special trees. You want to know if they're particularly rare. Is it a specimen quality tree that's of great value? Does it have cultural significance? Is it a gift tree? Is it a memorial tree? We've just planted 2 at Chatham within the last month, and so those trees must be protected. You'd hate to tell institutional advancement that you had to cut down a gift tree. Educational value, there are quite a lot of trees that may have a purpose that could be used in a class, whether it's, as we have, a landscape architecture program or a botany class, or perhaps even some other sustainability program. What is its ecological niche? Is it a feeder tree for a particular bug, like some lindens could be, or others? And of course, what its carbon sequestration rate is. We're developing a registry for our special trees that would require written approval before they can be removed, and that would come from my office and from the Institutional Advancement Office. We're suggesting that if a tree must be removed, it be replaced with a tree of a similar carbon sequestration rate within 6 months. Or, for every one you cut, you have to plant 3 more within 6 months, 2 of which become registered trees, so you're essentially doubling your registered trees. Or my favorite, equivalent RECs must be purchased. This would add a lot more economic value to trees. In a dollar-driven budget area, particularly some universities, it's very, very, very much bottom line. This helps a lot. It actually strengthens the case for trees. So my goals, and then people are going to go into a lot more detail, is to recommend tree preservation and planning policies for your campus planning. quantify the structure of the trees and the environmental services that they can provide, and to design responsible policies for the carbon sinks when you're doing your climate calculations. David Bloniars is going to talk a little bit more about this, how we actually use iTree, which people can use, and then Jen is going to show how it's responsible to set it up. So, Anne, did you want us to do questions as I go, or do you want me to just catch them all at the end?
We'll do most of them at the end, but I have a question for you now. Could you just tell me what specimen quality tree is?
Oh, sure. A specimen quality tree is a tree that is a particular value. Imagine an elm that is still healthy. There are some on campuses because they're perhaps removed from other elm trees. So a full-grown elm, 150, 200-year-old oak would be considered to be a specimen tree. Any tree that is remarkable for its size and growth and longevity would be considered to be a specimen tree, or if it's something really amazing. We have 2 Japanese maples, which, yeah, Japanese maples are everywhere, except that these were actually planted by the Olmsted brothers, so on our campus, 100 years ago. So those are specimen trees, and they're super protected. So, I see someone wants to know what RECs are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So REC is a renewable energy credit. So you use the renewable energy credits, or you purchase the green properties of some particular renewable energy project. And so we're suggesting that a REC be purchased would be the equivalent of the carbon of your tree.
Thanks, Mary.
All right, thanks.
Do you, perhaps you can answer one more question before we switch over to Dave.
Okay.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about the ways you've involved the campus community in this inventory, and if any students have been involved with any new planting on campus?
Sure. Yes, we actually, what we have are handheld GPS units that students can use. A lot of our students learn how to use them in the GIS classes that they take. Otherwise, we can run them through a quick training if we have volunteers. And then they basically have a forester's tape, which is a way to measure the diameter of the tree. It's like a big tape measure, basically. And they can go around campus and they literally go tree by tree, measure it, record it using the GPS unit, and then we take that and we can put it into iTree. So they're actually marking it on maps. We actually have a GIS-based map of where all of our trees are. We also use this, the education program. We have an environmental education certificate in our education program. They have their students come out and learn how to use the tree keys that they will then go and teach their students when they become teachers in the classroom. So we're sort of like letting people learn to identify trees as they go. The landscape studies and landscape architecture students sort of field all questions for what particular tree it is. But we pretty much know what they all are now. When we first started, we had some that were difficult to identify. So, and then it's new tree plantings. Students frequently get involved. We have, it depends on the situation. We had one just planted for Jose Azul was on campus and spoke, and we planted a tree in his honor. And then we also had a memorial tree to a student who died, so students get that opportunity to help for any of those plantings as well. Okay.
Okay. So, David, you're up next. And I have to say, by way of introduction, Dave has stepped in for a colleague and fit us in between 2 different lectures that he's giving in New Hampshire today. So I really appreciate you sharing the iTree story with us, Dave.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yep, you sound great.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm up in Portsmouth actually doing an iTree inventory workshop up here for 2 days with a group of folks from New England and New York. So I'm in the iTree mode, and so I'm filling in for Mark Tweary, who's from Burlington, Vermont, but I'm located down in Amherst, Massachusetts, where I'm a research scientist working with the USDA Forest Service, and I run a project called the Urban Natural Resources Institute. I'm also on the iTree development team, which is the team of researchers and partners that have helped to develop our iTree software products. The iTree is really short, or it's an acronym for the Inventory of Tree Resources, Economic and Environmental, or vice versa, environmental and economic. The idea is we're looking at the ecosystem services or the benefits that trees can provide, and then we can convert those into dollars and cents, and that dollars and cents provides us an economic value so that we can show trees as an important economic force as we try to lobby for more funding or appropriate funding levels, or look for how to compete with other resources at municipal levels and others. And on the campus, I'm sure you have the same type of thing. You're competing with the public safety as well as the infrastructure and parking lot services and a lot of the other folks to try to gather funding in order to implement your projects. And the idea here is to give you some tools that can provide you a little bit of information that will make your sales pitch or your instructions or your outreach and education a little more complete. So the goal here is in every, iTree is developed basically based on we're in the right place at the right time. We had some infrastructure in place within our Forest Service Research Organization and our partners, and then the constituent need. We had urban foresters from around the country asking us for some tools that we can start to look at, really looking at trees as a valuable component of the urban ecosystem, but looking at them from a standpoint of how can they really quantify some of the values to really be comparable to fit into arguments for climate change or stormwater management, pollution mitigation, energy conservation, our carbon strategies that you're talking about here, public health issues, environmental ed, economic development, green job creation, and tourism. So the idea is that we're trying to really grab the opportunity that existed, and through our partners we've been able to develop the iTree software suite, which I'll talk to you a little bit in a few minutes, and hopefully you can apply the tools that I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, or at least explore the possibility of utilizing some of these tools. I just want to step back for a second and talk to you a little bit about the planning process, and I think this is very important. Is we always start out with a vision, and then we assess what we have. We come up with some strategic planning decisions, and we can develop an annual work plan, and then we review it and we start over again on implementing our vision. So these progressively larger cycle loops continue over time. But the goal is, how in the planning process can iTree help you in your particular planning process, whether it be a capital improvements or new building or additional campus space that you've acquired, or whatever those vision or the planning process is. Over time, we want to help you to be able to assess and then have some tools that can help you in that planning process. So just keep in mind that iTree is just one of the tools that can help you in a variety of things with the planning process. The area that iTree can particularly help you in with is in the area of assessment and strategic planning. And within that area, that's where the iTree tools seem to have a particular value in a particular application. So in the process of planning, I just always like to look at the big picture, but look where iTree may fit especially well in your assessment and your strategic planning. The iTree software product itself, it's a public-private partnership that's about 6 years old. Our Forest Service scientists have been working on iTree components in various areas around the country, whether it be out in Sacramento, California, or in Syracuse, New York, Chicago, Amherst, Massachusetts. We had a series of Forest Service scientists working on research projects that involved urbanized landscapes, trees, and urban ecosystems. We combined efforts with the professional folks at Davey Tree Expert Company, part of the Davey Institute, which is a research arm of Davey Tree, and they're involved in the private sector commercial work, but they have a lot of historical data, a lot of information, and some good scientists on staff that we've teamed up with. Also with the National Arbor Day Foundation, it's the largest group of citizen advocates for urban and community forestry in the country. The Society of Municipal Arborists, which is the tree managers of urban green space as well as arborists around the country. And then the International Society of Arboriculture, international in scope, providing us with the scientific credibility through our research. All of the work that's done with iTree is based on peer-reviewed science. I'll talk to you in a minute about that. It's not just things that our folks have pulled together, but it's more of really research-based and taken about 20 years of research science and really trying to provide some tools for you. One of the neat things about this is the way iTree works. We look at it's sort of a loop, or other people look at this as a as a linear pattern, but I like to look at it as a loop where we look at the structure of what we have, and that could be the number of trees, the condition of the trees, what species the trees are, any problems with the trees. So we're looking at the overall structure of the trees, what makes up the urban forest, what makes up the campus trees, what makes up the trees in a city or town. From the structure, once we know that, we can then look at the function of what those trees functionally do from an ecosystem services standpoint. So we can look at what those trees are doing to functionally store carbon, sequester carbon, reduce stormwater runoff. What are they going to be what are they doing as far as reducing the amount of energy that needs to be expended for cooling costs in the summer? By strategically placing trees around buildings, we can reduce energy costs. So you're reducing the carbon footprint on that end, but we're also cooling the building for, to make the less expenditure by residents and commercial things. And what that means is we have a function. We can convert that function into dollar and cents value. And that's what is so important with the iTree tools here. We can look at the structure and the function, and we know what we have, and we know what it does. But now we can convert it into dollars and cents. And those dollars and cents will allow us then to be able to really look in perspective with other services or other parts of our infrastructure and really start to make some strategic management decisions that are informed, that are credible, that are timely, and they're based on peer-reviewed science. So this benefits-based approach, really looking at the structure, function, value, and then making our decisions on our management decisions. We're going to have tons of carbon stored, tons of carbon sequestered, amount of gallons of rainwater that is slowed and intercepted, things like that, and that all converts into real dollars and cents. So this makes a nice way to be able to look at this. So structure, function, value. What's included within the iTree software suite? You're getting 2 urban forest assessment tools. The first one is assesses street tree populations, and this is good for, it doesn't necessarily be a street, but it can be, there are linear segments that looks at, trees in a parking lot, or trees along the roadways within your campus, or trees along the streets or adjoining streets or city and municipal streets. The other thing you can look at is a variety of scales of urban ecosystems, whether it be a small, part of a campus. It could be a small vest pocket park. It could be an interior courtyard of a building. You can look at that as an ecosystem, and this is fully expandable to a larger, wider range of areas. So the whole thing is the geographic bounds of what your ecosystem is determined by you. You could look at half of a state, you can look at a county, you can look at a city, a village, all the way down to that small vest pocket park or interior courtyard of a building. The other thing that comes with iTree is a species selection tool that helps you to choose the appropriate species for particular location and settings. We have some benefits mapping, which will help you to actually map out where the most benefits are occurring in your ecosystem. There's an inventory management tool, and then finally there's a storm damage assessment tool. And this may be also useful for campus-wide application, where you can actually come up with a dollar value on cleanup costs associating with a storm immediately following it within 24 hours. And we do that in municipal settings because we have to do a preliminary damage assessment once a declaration of a disaster has been declared by the governor or the president. So what we're trying to do is to present some state-of-the-art peer-reviewed software that provides you with some of the tools to assess, to analyze, to report out, and to really strengthen your ability to make managerial decisions and advocacy efforts, and really to quantify the environmental services that trees provide, assess the structure of the forest, and really use that to your advantage as you're working in your campus, either as a state campus or a nonprofit or a community college. I'm on a campus here right now in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Great Bay Community College, and community colleges certainly they have grounds here with a lot of ecosystem components that we're going to be looking at with our 30 people this afternoon. So that's what iTree is about from that standpoint. The key vision for iTree, what we do is we look at the idea of development, dissemination, support, and refinement. So we're basing our product on peer-reviewed Forest Service science. It's publicly available via the web. It's accessible, and we have technical support. And that's where development, dissemination, support, and refinement comes in. It's sort of our vision as we look at the iTree process cycle. And this goes back to that planning cycle I talked to you about, a little bit different, but you're looking at the development of the product, we're disseminating it, and that's what I'm working on right now is we're introducing it to about 30 new people up here. We support it. We have an 800 dial-up number. We have online services. We have a web page. And then we refine it based on user feedback that we get. And that continues over time. So we're in the process right now. We've just released iTree 3.0, which is our third iteration of it. But that's based on the development. We've provided it out to people. We supported them in their efforts. And then with their feedback, we've been able to refine the product. So that's worked out very well in the iTree processing. Let me just point out a couple little things on the development. We're trying to make it as easy as we can for you to really integrate it with other operations that you're doing, whether it be an inventory or other reporting or forecasting efforts. The dissemination, if we can train people through established organizations, through campus groups, through landscape maintenance groups, through arboricultural, through other science-based programs, we're trying to do it that way. The support, we have committed to the users, and we support that with our web and our telephone access. And the idea is to really provide a mechanism so that we can get feedback from the end users so that there's really some efficiency in the refinement and the widespread application. The easier we make the product to use, the better off we're going to be because more people will be using that product. The user base is international in its standpoint. It's used by consultants, nonprofits, universities, statewide projects and assessment, and then, as I said, municipal projects. But here we see its use around the world, and then in the United States it's being used in all 50 states, and some more extensively than others. But we do have a wide user group that is very active on the website. We have a web forum where users can exchange ideas and tips and helpful hints and ask questions, and that is all part of the the refinement and support processes that we look at. So that's kind of neat that we do have it internationally and regionally as well. I just want to point out a couple things here, and this might be some applications that you could think of for use in your particular setting or on your campus, but we did a study in Minneapolis using iTree, and what we're able to do is to show there's almost $7 million in energy savings. There's $9.1 million in reduced stormwater, property values, and air quality. But the pictures on the right show you Jim Herman. He's the state urban forest coordinator out there. He actually went to the State House on Arbor Day, and they hung tree price tags from every tree on the campus or the grounds of the state capitol. And so that they were actually being able to quantify the value of the single trees, and then using iTree, and then we're able to demonstrate that in a graphic format for the legislators as they came in to work that morning. So the goal was to try to really provide some education, some outreach, but really in a manner that folks could understand. And then another one here is Milwaukee. Out in the Midwest right now, they have the emerald ash borer, a big threat. And you'll see just in Milwaukee, we were able to help them to look at, If the Emerald Ash Borer to affect, it could affect 17.4% of the canopy within the city itself, and then a citywide $221 million in structural damage. And then the functional impacts of the pollutant removal, the energy savings, storm reduction, all of that can be quantified and showed in real dollar values. So the idea is that informed management decisions can be made, and that needs to be translated down to your scale. If you were going to be, say, developing new parking areas or you're going to be new building sites, what is the impact of the potential of the costs associated with that in ecosystem services? How much of less pollutant removal, how much energy costs is going to go up, things like that. So you can make more informed decisions, and particularly as far as choosing locations or the amount of disruption to ecosystems that needs to occur through expansion. Another one, I'll just give you a couple more examples here, but Chattanooga, Tennessee, I worked out there with the city forester Gene Hyde out there, and we did a stratum analysis, which was a iTree streets analysis. The same thing could be applied to your college campus. Casper, Wyoming, looking at the effects and the values of Casper's urban forest. And then Oakville, Ontario, we helped them on developing some air and water quality management strategies, a 5-year and a 10-year plan for what they're going to do as far as protection, enhancement, and preservation of green space to improve air and water quality. The Mayor's Climate Protection Center has used iTree as part of the U.S. Conference of Mayors to really start to analyze some and compare cities side by side to see how well they're working together or in comparison to other cities of similar size and population levels. I just want to point out in Chattanooga, the idea was tying this in directly into the Climate Action Plan, but the Climate Action Plan really was an idea that came out of we need to address the climate forecast for Chattanooga, look at the EPA standards as well as some of the challenges that were presented to the town. They went and got public input. They calculated the carbon footprints, and they were able to really, with a green committee there, pull together some great science utilizing the stratum or the iTree streets analysis. So it really talked about the tons of CO2 removed and other particulate pollution, air quality, and water quality. Casper, Wyoming, just downtown picture, but you'll see here in Casper they were able to look at this city or town of 52,000 people. They found that they had the number of trees, 123,000. 33% were Siberian elms, okay? 70% of the trees are on public. The structural value of the trees, the compensatory value, $243 million. Carbon storage, $689,000. The functional value, $22,000 in carbon storage, $250,000 in pollution removal, $26,000 in energy savings by placing the right tree in the right place to either buffer winter winds or provide shading of structures. And then what they were able to do is leverage that in Casper to hire their first urban forester. They started a pilot forestry program, urban forestry program. They established benchmarks for whether they're going to do a good job or doing a bad job. They implemented programs to diversify the planting so they didn't have so many Siberian elms. And then they were able to access some money for administrative support. So the idea is to take the information that iTree can provide to you and really use that as a stepping stone in your education, your outreach, your marketing, or your arguments for increased funding or protection of green space within the environment you're working in. Oakville, Ontario, another one here directly tied into climate change. What they were trying to do is look at developing a strategic approach to urban forest greening within the city and protection of existing green infrastructure that they had. And they were able to take the iTree tools and through a stratum analysis as well as an iTree streets analysis as well as an iTree eco analysis, were able to come up with some great information that they were able to put into their report. And then their report, it allowed for them some integration of urban forestry into the air quality and climate change protection initiatives. They established some bylaws. They justified their urban forestry expenses for an inventory. And then develop some canopy goals and guidelines for future developments within the community. So the idea was it was multifaceted in the benefits that they received, and we're able to then take that information and utilize it in their strategy for the future. KC Trees down in Washington, D.C., it's a citizen advocate nonprofit group down there, but they've taken iTree and they've taken it to the next level by looking at individual trees within public right-of-way as well as private trees, and they developed a thing called it's called the Tree Benefits Calculator. And if you go to the Tree Benefits Calculator, it's all based on the calculations in iTree, and it provides you an opportunity to look at individual trees, but really come up with some values that look at carbon storage, and look at property value increase, look at temperature mitigation, reduction of urban heat islands. And so KC Trees has been a leader in this too, and one of our iTree partners working with us. Another one, Kansas City and California in Chula Vista, both looked at, they used the iTree Streets analysis, and as part of the economic stimulus package, we're able to leverage and look at the projects as critical or non-critical, but we're able to use some of the information that they had on hand for, with their streets analysis, to be able to provide some immediate response to the policymakers that were looking for projects that could fit into the economic stimulus package. So that sort of wraps up right at this point the iTree background, our dissemination and our refinement and our support and the vision we have and how this can fit into your planning. I still have some more slides if that's okay. Is that all?
Oh, sorry about that.
Oh, that's all right. No. I was just taking a pause right here. Sorry about that. That's my fault. But I'm just segueing into using iTree in the field, and this gives you a little bit of a hands-on component, if that's okay. And am I going too long, or am I on track?
No, you're great. Sorry about that. I always take too long switching it between speakers, so I was getting ahead of myself.
All right, that's cool. I think I have like about 8 or 9 more slides, so I'll go through these. But right now, taking iTree in the field, how do you go ahead and do that? And that's what I just want to talk to you about. One of the things is it's expandable in areas, I said. So you could look at a whole county, you could look at half of a state, but in your case on a college campus, you may divide your study areas or your campus into different quadrants or different areas, or some of you actually have several campuses that you're dealing with. The idea is you determine your study area, and in the urban arena we look at things the size of a Vest Pocket Park, or the interior courtyard of a building, all the way out to a watershed area. So we determine what that study area is, and the way iTree works, it's fully expandable to that wide range of areas. And then we determine whether we're going to be doing a eco-analysis, which is looking at ecosystem services, or if we're looking at a streets analysis. And on a campus, you probably have to look at both, or you may be more appropriate to use streets. It depends on what you're looking for in your particular situation. But eco can allow you to look at your whole campus-wide ecosystem services, those benefits that are provided by your trees on the campus. And that will be a powerful argument to increase that green space, increase the number of trees planted, increase the budget for the maintenance of trees so that they can grow successfully. On the streets, it's the same thing. You're just going to be doing linear plots as opposed to radial circular plots, and that will go along road segments or edges of parking lot or anything linear. So you just determine if the area-based or the street sample is what you're going to look at. And then you determine what data you want to collect. And the more data you collect, the more time it's going to take you. But we have to at least get the species of trees and the diameter at breast height. So we need to get the species and size of the trees. But then we have these optional variables, crown parameters, whether the height and the spread, the tree health, distance away from buildings, the shrub and ground cover layers when we're doing the eco-analysis, so that we can look at the whole ecosystem and all of the components. And once you determine what you're going to be looking for, you can set up the project right in iTree. And the user interface is pretty straightforward and pretty simple and intuitive. So you can go ahead and set up the project within the desktop or the on your laptop computer, and it allows you to really customize the program for the specifics of the data that you're collecting for your particular situation. And that's the idea here. This is customizable, so you're not, it's not a big cookie cutter approach that every place uses the same variables. Some places look at, have more time and energy or money or volunteers or staff to go out and look at things from a more close scale on the field analysis, and others have to take a more cursory look. So the idea is you set up your project, and that'll allow you to get out into the field to collect your information. And then what happens is you lay out these sample points out on the determined area or predetermined area, whether they be a random pattern of circular plots, or they be those linear plots along a roadway. You're going to do that. You can stratify these by land use. You can do a random grid. You can do a random pattern. There's a variety of different ways that you can do this, but iTree also has within it a sample generator. So it allows you to use some off-the-web information to provide you with developing these plots. Campuses, you may have your own GIS, and folks at your GIS office may be able to help you to do that even easier. If they can do the heavy lifting, that's great. But within this, we have the ability to do that for you. And then what you do is you have to go out and you have to train the people who go out and collect the information. And we have it set up now that everything can go onto a PDA. And some of the smartphones run the PDA applications. We use Windows Mobile. And a lot of the smartphones have the Windows Mobile built within them. So you use the PDA or the smartphone out in the field, and we have the data is collected in a pretty much systematic manner. So once you get used to it through training and through practice, you can go from one plot to another, collecting your information in a pretty strategic way, in a timely way, and something that you can make some sense with. In this case here, you see one of our scientists, he was doing a linear plot, a radial plot, and it turned out that it was in the middle of this wetland area. But being the true federal servant that he was, he had to go out and mark that location and grab the GIS coordinate for it. I don't get that deep in detail into it, and my data might be a little more skewed than his, but the neat little thing about this is it's very simply implementable, and that's the key for you, is to have something that's implementable and fairly easy to use out in the field. And then what you do is, once you collect all your information out in the field, you bring the data back, and it automatically synchronizes with your the iTree applications on your computer. Okay, so you can create the project, and all of the components of what you've collected in the field are automatically fill in, or they populate all of the databases within the program, and then it allows for the modeling engines to take over and really start to then provide us with that information on the structure, the function, and the value of the green space. And the idea is there's a lot of iTree analyses that can come out of this, and a lot of it are in graphic format, a lot of it are in tabular format, so you have the ability to produce some good-looking reports pretty fairly easily by just copying and pasting into your desktop publisher, into your word processor. The other thing is on the iTree Eco, right now we have a automatic report generator. You can send the data into us. I think by the end of the summer you'll be able to do it on your desktop, but right now we're fine-tuning it. So what you do is you have your data, you report it in, and then within a day you get back this automatic report, which has some pretty neat graphics, and it really has a professional-looking report that will allow you to report out the iTree Eco. So in this case here, you could send in Quinsigamon Community College, and it would have your title on the cover with an image from your college, and then a variety of the information that you wanted to report out on based on what you collected. So that's included within the iTree software also. Another one here is I just want to talk to you a little bit about is iTree Species and iTree Storm are two other components of iTree that are in the software. I don't think Species helps you determine the correct species for a particular location. And then Storm, as I talked to you a little bit about, is the preparation for that disaster from a widespread storm event. Those I don't know if, you're looking right now primarily at, carbon storage, carbon footprint. and reducing all of your impacts through trees. So these may be a little bit off the track of today's discussion, but they're certainly an important part of management on your campus. So I just want to recap here. We have 4 programs within there in iTree. It's iTree Eco, iTree Streets, iTree Storm, and iTree Species. We provide technical support for it. We have a web forum where users get in and really give some ideas and start talking about things. We track the issues, the problems, and the suggestions. We have users manuals that are very extensive and very complete. And then we provide training. Like today, we're up here for 2 days, and we have about 6 instructors that are providing to the 30 folks that are here instructional inside and outdoor classroom and field instruction. The final thing I just wanted to mention is the web page, the resources. It's www.itreetools.org. And I'll show you that, but it has it's very intuitive, but it is very resourceful, and it has archives going back 4 years on copies of presentations and some of the legacy programs that made up the original iTree, as well as what to look for in the future, as well as some PowerPoints, as well as the manuals and things like that. So the other thing I just want to point out is that iTree represents partnership at its best, whether it be with students or with the community or with a nonprofit group. These are science-based solutions. And it's really a Forest Service technical transfer success. And one of the neat things is it's an opportunity in the private sector for folks to get into some consulting that otherwise might not do that. But we are our own consultants, so as a campus manager, I'm sure that iTree may fit part of the bill for what you need. And I just wanted to give you my email address. It's dbloniars@fs.fed.us. And then our web address is www.itreetools.org. And you see the CD here. Originally we distributed this via CD, version 1, but since version 3 came out, it's all fully downloadable and instantaneously via the web. So you can go to itreetools.org, you can log in, you can register, and you can go ahead and download the program as well as get into all the support features. So that wraps it up for what I have to say today, and I just wanted to try to introduce iTree as a component of what you might be looking on your college campuses.
Steve, thank you so much. And before I turn things over to Jennifer, I thought I'd first take the moment to say if everybody else's heads are spinning and are kind of blown away by how cool iTree is, don't worry. The webinar archive will be available to everyone who participated in a couple of weeks as soon as we compress the file and manage to upload it to our website. So you'll be able to watch Dave's presentation again, and I'm already looking forward to it. Dave, I thought I'd ask you a quick question, although we have quite a few questions for you.
Okay, sure.
On the website or through iTree, are there trainings available specifically for the folks who are going out into the field? I think as campus sustainability professionals, one of our greatest challenges is to best train our volunteer corps, and I was wondering if iTree provides training specifically for those folks.
Yeah, we do a lot of, there's 2 levels of the training. We do a lot of we do the train the trainer training, and that's what we're basically doing here today. But then we also get involved through some of those folks in each state. You can, the state urban forest coordinator that's in their natural resource agency are all aware of this. So they have the pulse of what trainings are going on within the regions. The other thing is we can set up, if you were to have you wanted to set up a 2-day training, we have consultants that we can provide to you to do that have gone through our training, or we could assist you directly depending on where, when, and how. A lot of the trainings, presentations and materials are on the website from our past trainings. I've done trainings out in Denver and down at Rutgers University in Minneapolis. We've been out to Virginia Tech. I'm in Portsmouth here. I've been in Hartford. I've been a million places. So there's no one way to get the training out, but the website is a good place to start. Second is your urban forest coordinator, and third, you can send me an email and I'll direct you wherever your location is. And if your organization wants to do it, we could possibly set up something for you. Also on our website, there's some recent webcasts that are on there. So Scott Macko, one of our team members, as well as the folks from KC Tree have a couple presentations that we put on there, as well as one from me that go into a little more detail on the components.
Thanks, Dave. That's really helpful. Okay, so up next is my colleague Jen Andrews, who's going to take the kinds of information that you can gain from iTree and tell us where it meets our greenhouse gas inventories, our carbon management plans. And we had lots of questions already in the dashboard on sequestration and supply chains. So hopefully your presentation, Jen, will sort of put us on the same foot to then tackle those even more complicated and harder questions. Thanks.
Well, my hope is to at least get us started in that. So thank you, Anne, for moderating. Thank you, Dave, for, again, taking the time to share iTree with us. And I especially want to say thank you to Mary, who got this whole conversation started, because she recognized early on that while there that there needed to be some clarity around how we look at our campus trees and our campus forests in terms of our climate action planning, and spoke to us several times about how to do that, and worked with us to put together a workshop back at Smart Sustainable Campuses conference in Maryland, and this webinar, and with whom we hope to be doing a interactive workshop at HE to get more kind of conversation going with you all and others there about specific policies that will help us all be on the same page. So thank you, Mary, for getting this conversation going. It's certainly been one of interest to a lot of our partners, and I imagine will continue to be so. For those of you that aren't entirely familiar with CACP, excuse me 1 minute, I'm just figuring out how to advance my slides here. Can you click on this minute? So there we go. So Clean Air Cool Planet, of course, is a Northeast-based nonprofit in the business of solving global warming. We've been around 10 years now, a little over 10 years actually. And we work with businesses, we work with local governments, with colleges and universities on practical solutions to climate change. We have a program that's looking at short-lived pollutants and saving the Arctic, and we have a policy center in DC as well. So we do a lot of work both around civic engagement and around smart policies. And our work with colleges and universities has been one of our core programs since the beginning. In all of our civic engagement programs, and certainly in our campus program, working with our partners, we've recognized that these challenges are at the core of concrete climate action. So in order to really make progress in greenhouse gas reductions and show leadership, you need to figure out some quantitative information. You need to know what your emission sources are and where they're trending, and how that may or may not differ from where you want them to trend. You obviously need to know your most cost-effective measures for emissions reductions, and you need to be able to track progress and communicate that to your stakeholders, because as we've seen over and over, there can be a lot of great work done that has educational value and sort of meets broad sustainability criteria, but if it's not done sort of comprehensively and with an eye on the numbers, you can find yourself with sort of the same or even a greater footprint at the end of your project as at the beginning, because you may not be focusing your resources in the most strategic place. And so one of our roles early on from the beginning has been helping our partners answer these questions, respond to these challenges. And we've done that largely with the help of our campus carbon calculator, with which many of you may be familiar. So The carbon calculator available for free download from our website, geared largely toward colleges and universities, so it has been used by state agencies, science centers, businesses, local governments, and others. Over 1,500 users at this point, a tool of record for the American College and University President's Climate Commitment. And really the role of the calculator is to help campus-like institutions be on the same page and have some kind of standardized methodologies and criteria for measuring and reporting their greenhouse gas emissions. And we think that that's valuable because we can't be certain what our reporting means if we aren't certain that my ton is equal to your ton of carbon and that we're drawing boundaries and doing our calculations using similar decision-making processes. So the carbon calculator has really put us in a role to play a part in the dialogue with other leaders in the field of carbon accounting, including the World Resources Institute, ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, the Carbon Disclosure Project, and others, all of whom recognize the need for one standardized carbon accounting methodology. Close to that, it's cost-effective for organizations and institutions to do these inventories and then get on to the hard work of carbon reduction. And as I said, so that we're all kind of measuring from the same playbook, because especially once carbon has a dollar value, we all need to certainly be measuring the same way. So my role very often in working with colleges and universities is sort of wearing a carbon accounting hat. And one of the most common questions that we have gotten from partners over the last 10 years is about the role of campus forests. A little more information about the campus carbon calculator, which does allow you to figure out your baseline inventory as well as to sort of look at what your emissions will be moving forward given different assumptions, and then in the solutions module come up with mitigation projects and measure the impact of those mitigation projects, both in terms of carbon and dollars per ton of carbon. So and sort of looking at things from a strict carbon accounting standpoint, especially an enterprise carbon accounting standpoint, which basically means we're not looking at this, we're not looking at the inventories of countries, but we're looking at the inventories of individual organizations and institutions, which, because they're all about sort of property ownership and control, the boundaries may be somewhat arbitrary or not kind of in accordance with the carbon cycle per se. That said, what we want our greenhouse gas inventories to do are a couple of things. We want them to identify our carbon liabilities, our risks in terms of coming regulation, in terms of coming carbon markets. And so you can look at it very much as just a management tool to sort of figure out where you may be exposed to either financial or regulatory risks. We also want our inventories to help us clarify our reduction priorities and to help us track our progress. But especially as colleges and universities playing a leadership role, our inventories, we need to look at them as more than just a report of carbon liabilities that we want to get as close to zero as possible, though of course we do. But we want to do that because we know that we need to address the problem of climate change, not because primarily we're looking out for our own institutional self-interest. And we also know that as leaders it's important to provide transparency for our stakeholders and our students, our faculty, our staff, our community members, our alumni, our donors, all of whom are interested in what we're doing to reduce our footprint. And so in some ways I think it's a little different, or it can be, doing a greenhouse gas inventory as a college or university with a mandate from or responsibility toward your community in terms of social leadership. And so when we get questions around forests and carbon sequestration and how they sort of show up on inventories, I often need to sort of go back and remind folks, sort of play the carbon over in a way, and remind folks that the point of doing this is to understand where are the places where we can reduce, where are our opportunities, how are we contributing to climate change. And so that's one of the reasons why, when you report your emissions, whether you're reporting to the American College and University President's Climate Commitment, whether you're reporting to the World Resources, through the World Resources Institute Carbon Accounting and Reporting Protocol to something like the Climate Registry, the emissions that you report are broader than just the ones that come from, your smokestacks or your tailpipes. And we've developed categories to indicate that, right? So when you do your greenhouse gas inventory, you're not just reporting your Scope 1 emissions that come from stationary combustion, your boilers, your plants, et cetera. You're not just reporting your mobile combustion emissions that come from your vehicle tailpipes, or those fugitive emissions from refrigerants or fertilizers or whatnot. But you're also reporting Scope 2 emissions that the utilities that you patronize actually generate. And you're also reporting Scope 3 emissions that result from commuting or air travel, things that you have a limited amount of control over, but you have influence. And the reason that you're reporting those Scope 3 emissions particularly is because you do have influence, because of your ability to educate your community members. And the best practice guidance over the last couple of years has sort of added that we need to report our biogenic emissions, our emissions from burning biomass or biofuels. So even though these are considered for purposes of, again, liability, say, carbon neutral, burning wood chips in your boiler or whatever is considered not to add to your carbon footprint, you are still asked to report the actual carbon emissions that result from that combustion, because we recognize that that's the more complete and transparent way to go. In that same spirit, I think colleges and universities especially have wanted to look at the sinks that their forests represent and to report those as well, because there is certainly an educational benefit in understanding that, both in terms of just understanding basic climate science and understanding good land management practices. The thing to know about reporting emissions, and particularly sequestration from your campus trees, is that that falls, in the same way that sort of biogenic emissions fall into a different category, your biogenic sequestration is going to fall into a different category. And in fact, it's not even necessarily going to show up as an integrated part of your greenhouse gas baseline, but rather be calculated using project accounting methodology. So the World Resources Institute and World Business Council for Sustainable Development, back almost 10 years ago, put together a couple of really seminal guidance documents for carbon accounting. The Greenhouse Gas Protocol Accounting and Reporting Protocol, and then the Project Accounting Protocol. And so the Accounting and Reporting Protocol is really about your baseline. The Project Accounting Protocol is really about what are you doing after you calculate your baseline to mitigate. And anything around sequestration is necessarily looked at using that Project Accounting Protocol put out by the World Resources Institute. And then they have an additional guidance document that anyone that's interested in this topic or trying to figure out how to include their forests in their greenhouse gas inventory really needs to take a look at. And this is the land use change, and forestry guidance for greenhouse gas project accounting, which you can find at www.wri.org. This is sort of your basic, this is the first place you go if you're interested in this question. What that guidance document will tell you is that in order for any forestry project to count against your baseline inventory, it's going to need to meet the criteria of an offset. And many of you may be very familiar with the dialogue around offsets and quality offsets. Some of you may be less familiar. An offset, of course, is basically a project undertaken to reduce carbon in one area, and that carbon reduction is then sold to someone who wants to reduce their carbon but can't cost effectively do it, where they are. So if I'm a college campus and I've reduced a bunch of my emissions, and then the next ton for me to reduce on campus is going to be 10 times the cost of the ton I just reduced. But meanwhile, there's a nonprofit or a business or a city next door who still has a lot of very cost-effective reduction measures available to them. Maybe it makes sense to invest resources in those more cost-effective reduction measures first. If you do that and you take the credit for it, that's an offset. And what we've said is that whether you're a business, a college, a government, whatever, there are some specific criteria a project needs to meet in order for it to count as an offset. So it needs to be, Clean Air Cool Planet put out this Consumer's Guide to Retail Carbon Offset several years ago now. It's available on our website for free download. And the criteria that it spells out, which is the criteria you'll see anywhere in the offset industry as sort of a bare minimum, is that your offsets need to be real. They are demonstrably, from a scientific basis, reducing carbon. They're additional. It's carbon that would not have been reduced had the project not been undertaken. So this relates, of course, to forest sequestration in that if your forests were there already, you cannot say that there is additional carbon being sequestered as a result of the campus's activity. Therefore, it does not count as an offset. It's something that was already happening. It needs to be verifiable. A third party needs to be able to go in and see, yep, this is happening, and here's the kind of scientific basis behind it. I get the same result as you got. Your assumptions are not off base. It needs to be enforceable, and it needs to be permanent. There's a lot more information about all of these criteria in this guide, which I recommend that you read. Permanence, of course, is an offset criteria that sometimes is problematic for forests because forests are susceptible to changes in ways that some infrastructure is not. So, for example, fire or storms or pest damage can kind of wipe out the carbon sequestration benefits you may have gotten from a forest that you've already counted. And in that case, of course, the offset is not permanent. For those of you that are signatories to the American College and University President's Climate Commitment, there are 2 additional offset criteria that they lay out as well, and these are both actually related to forests in positive and negative ways. Synchronous means that the sequestration that you're getting from your offset should be happening in about the same time frame of the emissions that you're offsetting. So sometimes that's problematic in terms of forests because the forest sequestration, the sequestration that you're attributing to any given tree is going to happen over the course of a number of years, over the course of maybe 90 to 100 years, which, depending on how you define synchronous, could or could not be considered sort of in the same time frame as those emissions. So that's sort of a question mark and something that you'd have to deal with. And then cascading benefit means, of course, that there are other things that you get out of using this offset criteria, and naturally, forests do meet that criteria. For those of you that are interested in, okay, so we think we do want to change our management practices in our campus forests, or we think we want to reforest or afforest some land. Oftentimes, those projects can count as offsets, and there are tools for helping you analyze and ensure that your project meet those criteria that were listed on the previous slide, and that addresses some of the potential problems like permanence or additionality or synchronicity. And one great place to go for resources around that, other than that WRI document, is the Voluntary Carbon Standard, which is an organization really dedicated to, again, making sure that we're all sort of on the same page with our carbon accounting standards, particularly around offsets, because offsets, there's so little regulation or oversight into the market. Right now it's a voluntary market, which means there's no one who has sort of authority to say, yes, this is an okay business practice, no, this is not an okay business practice. The Voluntary Carbon Standard is trying to set out those standards, and in the guidance documents they have around agriculture, forestry, and land use, you'll find a lot of really helpful information about how to determine whether or not what it is that you want to do in terms of afforestation or reforestation sort of meets the level of an offset, and how to address some potential issues around that. So I recommend that as a resource for those of you that are wanting to go down that road. One other note about forests and offsets in your greenhouse gas inventory, and it relates to relative impact. So this is the part where I sort of see if you're all still awake after listening to someone over the phone, staring at your computer screen for an hour and 10 minutes. This is a little quiz for you. I'll tell you off the bat that when I first looked at this, I did not do as well as I thought I would on the quiz. So these action items are all arranged in no particular order, and I want you to see if you can take 30 seconds and kind of roughly, on a scratch piece of paper or in your own head, see if you can figure out how you would order these least to most in terms of carbon mitigation. So which one is going to remove or reduce the least amount of carbon to the most amount of carbon? And we're going to do the awkward 30 seconds of quiet on the phone to let you all sort of think about that. All righty. All right, pens and pencils down. Give you the answer to our little quiz here on this slide. So, do trees lose? So unfortunately, when you're looking at an individual tree, trees lose when you're only looking at how much carbon is reduced or sequestered from a given action. Of course, all of these things involve a lot of assumptions, that is, how high efficiency is your refrigerator and how low efficiency is the one you're replacing, how often are those two light bulbs used. So of course, there's lots of assumptions built into these numbers. And the object, of course, is not that you should not plant trees, far from it, but it's just to highlight the fact that there are lots of activities that we can do to reduce our carbon emissions, and that we need to be thinking strategically about high-impact activities, as well as thinking strategically about, educational value, environmental and ecosystem benefits, and others. So I don't know, give yourself gold stars. Some of you may have already known that, but I certainly thought of trees as kind of higher up on the list. But that's just because they're fabulous, even if they only theoretically, in our little exercise here, reduce 40 pounds a year. Okay, almost done here, and then we can get to our many questions. So we looked at this screen capture from the American Coalition University President's Climate Commitment Reporting tool, and we said, okay, there are different categories of emissions, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. There are biogenic emissions sort of pulled out separately and reported, because that's good practice. It's helpful to know what are you emitting, even if those are considered part of the natural carbon cycle. In the same way, it's absolutely good practice to be able to say down here on the bottom of the same reporting mechanism, how much is sequestered due to land owned by the institution, and how was that sequestration calculated, so that you're transparent about your method. Likewise, composting, and of course, anyone who is publicly reporting and implementing a climate action plan is going to want to report any carbon offsets that they've purchased, or for that matter, sold. If you're doing reduction measures on your campus and you're selling offsets as a result, of course, you're going to lose the right to claim those reductions. So if you're that would need to go into your inventory as well. But the point being that the metric tons of CO2 that is sequestered due to the land owned by your institution is not going to be subtracted from your total emissions. And so it's not going to count against your overall reduction commitment or goals. But it is going to be an important metric because, A, it allows you to sort of see how you're doing and managing your campus in your green space. And it also, I think, can serve as a deterrent to deforestation on your campus because you want to see that number at the very least staying level. You don't want to see it going down. And so it's another tool for you as advocates in terms of green space and good forest management on your campuses. All right, so just a couple of kind of conclusions again. Wearing the carbon accounting overhat, campus trees are not an offset per se, unless you have a project, a reforestation or afforestation project that's verified as an offset by the Voluntary Carbon Standard or another credible offset standards organization. So that's not just I'm going to figure out how many acres are in my campus forest, get a carbon sequestration rate for an acre of forest in northern latitudes and plug that into the columns for tons sequestered in the campus carbon calculator. It has to meet the criteria for an offset if you're going to subtract it from your total. On the other hand, preserving and reporting on campus forests is absolutely a part of climate leadership. And as long as we all understand why we're doing it and how we can talk about it, then it's absolutely a worthwhile exercise. And tools like iTree are an important part of that exercise. For those of you that had asked about sequestration rates, along with that tool I showed you from the Voluntary Carbon Standard and along with WRI's document, you'll want to take a look at the EPA's website on forestry and agriculture, which I can give you that website in just a second.
Yep. I can read it to you. It's http www.epa.gov/rates.html. And as I shared earlier, we will be distributing the slides from today's presentation as a PDF as well as a video file of our webinar to all participants. And we can stick in one more last slide with the links to the EPA as well as any other links that come up during our conversation, so you can have them as part of the webinar archive.
That's great. And I'll also link to an article that we wrote for the American College and University President's Climate Commitment last year. Those of you that are signatories, it's become sort of the bottom line in terms of ACU PCC reporting on forests, and so there's maybe some useful information for you on that as well. So with that, I think we can open it up for questions, Anne, which I imagine we have many.
We do have a number, although I think a lot of them are sort of related. Dave, the first question is for you, and we've gotten this a couple of times. Could you talk a little bit about the different softwares? You talked about the iTree Streets and the iTree Eco, and how a campus could use those different formats together, since they probably have sort of a more urban setting on campus, but they also might have a campus forest.
Yeah, and that's sort of the, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. And that's why it's, different places will do different things, and that's why cities and towns have faced with the same thing. They use streets for the street tree population, then they'll use eco for some of their parks. So there's no reason that you can't divide up your campus or use both of those on your particular setting, and then use the streets for the street tree in the developed areas, and then you can use the eco for the more forested areas or forested landscapes.
Okay.
But they're separate data collection processes.
Okay, and that gets us to a related question, which is that some folks have tree inventories or a start this process in Excel or in other databases, and would you recommend, can they sort of import that information, or is it better to start at square one with the little GPS handheld joggers?
No. The existing data is fine. I just took an inventory in Springfield, Massachusetts with some of my students at the University of Massachusetts, and they had 26,000 street trees already inventoried. So, it'd be nearly impossible and too costly to start over. So what you're able to do is to take an Excel or a any kind of database, and that can be imported readily right over into iTree Streets for the analysis. It's explained in the manual that each variable you might have a little bit of interpretation because you didn't collect the exact same information. But we did that in Springfield, Providence, and Worcester, Massachusetts, Providence, Rhode Island, and it worked out fine. So you don't want to start from scratch. You want to take your existing data if it's relatively new within the last 3 or 4 years.
Okay, thanks. That's really helpful, and good to know for those folks who, haven't done a campus policy like Chatham or haven't yet started. But I do have information that all is not lost. Jen, there's quite a few questions about sequestration, and do you mind saying a little bit about where you see tools like iTree coming into the conversation about sequestration, but also about supply chains? If our campus trees were being harvested for, I don't know, campus furniture, for example, how would we account for that? And should we, why wouldn't we ask that question? Maybe.
Well, so there's a couple of different ways to approach that question. Guidance around carbon sequestration and supply chains, when you're trying to come up with a kind of carbon impact for a product, there's a lot of great information about that and a lot of great work being done, although it's still sort of evolving, from the Carbon Disclosure Project. So if you're sort of interested in supply chain standards and what's already been done and what's out there, the Carbon Disclosure Project is a great place to go for information. I couldn't possibly sort of run down all of the nuances of that in the next 5 minutes, but I would direct folks there, and would be happy to take some specific questions sort of offline if people have them. In terms of kind of more directly trying to do some outreach or education around, look, we source our furniture in our campus sustainability center locally from our local forests, I think it would be easy and appropriate to look at, okay, how much tree or how many trees did it take to make this furniture, and use iTree or another tool like it to sort of figure out, okay, well, how much carbon is sequestered in that. And, that can be a talking point. Of course, if you're going to do a talking point like that, then you start getting into questions, I think, pretty quickly of, okay, well, does that take into account, is that the full carbon footprint of the furniture? What about processing it? What about cutting it down? Was the tree replanted? So it's never sort of easy as a kind of straight-up number. On the other hand, just for educational purposes and to talk about the value of kind of local economies and local sourcing, of course it would be perfectly appropriate to use a tool like this to give people little factoids. But just understand that as soon as you start getting into individual numbers, or as soon as you start looking at supply chain, it's incredibly, you're opening up a big can of worms. It's hard to take just one piece of that and have it be meaningful or have it be sort of satisfactory for people. Just know what you're getting into, I guess.
And
I have a, yes,
and this is Mary. There's a question that just popped up that I think we should address. It's pretty important. That came up from the audience question. So okay, someone asked, it says, in summary, is accounting for CO2 sequestered through campus trees subtracted from the bottom line total emissions? Is this statement true? No, it is false. That is absolutely not what we are suggesting. We are suggesting that carbon sequestered through campus trees needs to get added back on to your footprint if anything happens to those trees. Those trees do their job day in, day out, and your footprint would actually be worse without them. But just because they're there, that doesn't take anything off your footprint. So I'm sorry, that's like probably the takeaway from this session.
Yeah. If you take nothing else, understand that you cannot subtract what is in your forest from your footprint.
Yes.
But it would be appropriate to communicate, if you're taking down trees, what is being lost in terms of sequestration, and as Mary said, adding that back into your footprint.
Thanks. And both Mary and Jen, this question is for both of you. What's the conversation on campuses between the increased desire for biomass fuel sources on campus and even sourcing locally for that biomass, and managing campus forests for sequestration? So, you know, how has the campus community so far sort of talked about balancing those two opposing?
That's an interesting question.
Opposing?
Chatham may not be the right people to answer this question because we are an urban campus and we buy all of our electric power directly from a utility. And we're in historic districts, so we're unlikely to be able to set up biomass power in any way, shape, or form. So that's probably not actually going to come up much for us. People that probably answer those questions are not necessarily me.
Mm-hmm. I guess what I've seen so far is that there are an increasing number of campuses who, as biomass becomes more and more examined as an option, really are looking to source locally, but they immediately run into issues of whether or not they have enough land to support that, whether or not they have the capacity to support that, and if they really want to become sort of forest managers if they're not already. Those that do have campus forests, very often those are research forests, or they're already being managed in a sort of industrial sense. And so the folks that are kind of looking at the energy picture and sort of local sourcing aren't necessarily the folks that are managing the forest, especially if it's a research forest. So to some degree what I've seen is a disconnect, I would say, between those two conversations. Both conversations are happening more and more, but not necessarily kind of at the same time in the same room. So I can't really say that there's a trend one way or the other. There's just interest in both. One of the things that I think I neglected to say, there was a question about best management practices, because changing forest management is sometimes counted as an offset depending on what you're doing. And again, other than that voluntary carbon standard, those sets of documents, you could look at the EPA site, and there's some information there about forest management practices that increase carbon sequestration. Also, there was a clarifying question about that URL and it not coming up, and I just want to say that there's an S at the end of rate, so it's epa.gov/sequestration/rates.
Okay. Well, we're just about out of time, so I want to give all of our speakers a chance to maybe send our audience off with you know, one last task or the first thing to do. And Mary, maybe we can start with you. I was really struck by how you shared talking with your institutional advancement or your development office as part of your tree inventory. And I think that we all forget how much of a hand our development offices have in our campus landscape. Would you suggest talking to anybody else on campus as part of a project like yours?
You know, I have actually found the most support through our facilities department. They just think it's fantastic that someone is speaking up for the trees as trees instead of just as decorative items. And they're 100% behind. So you might be surprised. There are a lot of people in a lot of places on campus that are surprisingly strong supporters. They're not the places you would think of right away. Facilities is my biggest backer.
That's great. Dave, we had a question from the audience asking if all state foresters are up to speed and know how to help us with iTree. Would you recommend that our campus partners reach out to their state foresters?
Yeah, what I would try to reach out first is to each state has an urban forest coordinator that generally works underneath the state forester, but the state forester would be familiar with who that is in your particular state. The other thing you can do is reach out to the Forest Service. We have some regional offices in Morgantown, West Virginia, Durham, New Hampshire, down in Newtown Square, Pennsylvania, a variety of different places. And if you go to search on Google for urban forestry, U.S. Forest Service, within there there'll be some guidance on who locally or within your region you could talk to. John Perry, Ann Cumming, Donna Murphy, those are folks that are available in the Midwest and Mid-Atlantic, and they can certainly steer you in the right direction. And then you have my email, dbloniars@fs.fed.us. You can send me an email. And then the other thing is the www.itreetools.org also can give you some guidance in there, especially if you go into the forum. You can, some folks have talked about that. Where do I go next? Where do I, how are the steps to implement this? And there's some success stories, and they'll tell you how they've done it. And folks are really willing to share there.
Thanks, Dave. And Jen, any thoughts on next steps other than reading the implementer's guide that you mentioned? We also had a question. Can you just tell the audience what WRI stands for?
The World Resources Institute is
Yes.
WRI, and again, they hold sort of the key documents in basic carbon accounting. So if that's becoming part of your job description, they're going to be your best friend, and you want to get familiar with them. I guess I always end up being the bearer of bad news, but the first thing I would say is, if you're hoping that your existing campus forests are going to be a wedge in your climate action plan or help you get to where you want to go, I would stop hoping and start looking elsewhere. In most cases, they're not, because most campuses are not in a position to actually be doing verified carbon offsets with their campus forests or trees. But what I would say is that do the tree inventory, and do look at the policies that Mary outlined on her slides at the beginning, because focusing on campus trees and forests is going to help you meet your sustainability goals and make all of your climate action leadership more credible in the long run, and provide a great educational opportunity for your students. So it's worthwhile.
And I think one of the most exciting things I'm taking away as someone who focuses primarily on building efficiency was the way in which iTree can help us better quantify passive cooling techniques. And I can see that can be a wedge, and a quantifiable wedge, and one that we should talk about as a community more often. So maybe that can be a topic for a future webinar.
Ooh,
and we can invite Mary and Dave back.
Okay.
Yeah. But Mary and Dave and Jennifer, thank you so much. This was a really fascinating topic, and thank you all for such interesting questions. I hope that you'll find your questions answered by the contents of the archive, but if you still have any remaining ones, please feel free to reach out to Clean Air, Cool Planet or to the speakers. And again, Dave and Mary and Jen, thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
It's great.
Bye.
Thank you very much.